wiped the sweat from his face and looked up at the dark ceiling of the mine. 60 meters of rock and ice separated him from the surface of Europa. 60 meters between him and the cold stars. He had worked in this mine for 7 years, ever since they took him from Earth. There were tall creatures with hard shells like insects. They had 6 arms and eyes that never blinked. They came to Earth 60 years ago when grandparents were young. They came with ships that blocked out the sun. They came with weapons that turned cities to ash. And they came with one strange law that nobody understood. Mathematics was forbidden. Not just forbidden, punishable by death. Remembered the day they killed his teacher. Professor had been a gentle old man who loved numbers the way some people loved music. The found equations hidden in his home. They dragged him to the center of the colony and made everyone watch. Was 19 years old. He had just finished his physics degree in secret. He watched his teacher die and promised himself he would never forget what he learned. That was 9 years ago. Now was just a miner, a nobody, a human who knew his place. But at night, when the lights went dark and his roommates slept, still did mathematics in his head. He calculated the stress points of the rock above him. He figured out the orbital patterns of Jupiter's moons. He solved equations that had no purpose except to remind him that he was still human. They never explained why they banned mathematics. Some humans thought it was to keep them stupid. Others thought it was some strange alien religion. Nobody knew the truth. Until today. The accident happened in Tunnel 7. A support beam cracked and the ceiling started to fall. Was close to the exit, but Overseer was not. The commander stood frozen as rocks fell toward him. Did not think, he just moved. He grabbed the alien's arm and pulled him toward the exit. The ceiling crashed down behind them. Dust and ice filled the air. When it cleared and were alive, 3 other miners were not. Looked at with those unblinking eyes. The alien said nothing for a long moment. Then he spoke in his clicking voice. "You saved me, human. This is unexpected. You will be rewarded." Did not want a reward. He wanted to be invisible. Invisible humans lived longer. But 3 days later, soldiers came and took him from the mine. They put him in a transport ship and flew him to the main colony. They gave him new clothes that were clean and soft. They put him in an office with windows that looked out at the stars. His new job was simple. He would organize files, old files from before they came, files that nobody cared about anymore. The first week was boring. Sorted papers about mining equipment and food supplies. He filed reports about weather patterns and population counts. Nothing important, nothing dangerous. Then he found the box. It was hidden in the back of a storage room, covered in dust. The label said biological research restricted. Knew he should leave it alone. He knew that curious humans did not live long lives. But he opened it anyway. Inside were papers, hundreds of pages covered in equations, mathematical formulas that made his heart beat faster. He recognized the handwriting immediately. Professor. His teacher had not just been studying physics. He had been studying themselves, their bodies, their behavior, their weaknesses. Read the papers with shaking hands. The mathematics was complex, but he understood it. Professor had discovered something incredible. They were predictable. Not just a little predictable, perfectly predictable. Their bodies worked in patterns that followed exact mathematical rules. Their shells vibrated at specific frequencies. Their brains sent signals in sequences based on prime numbers. Even their emotions followed formulas that could be calculated. On Earth, no creature was this predictable. Life was chaos. Animals adapted and changed and surprised each other. But they evolved on a world with no predators, no competition, no chaos. They developed in perfect mathematical harmony. And that harmony was their weakness. Professor had figured out how to calculate the exact frequency that would shatter a shell. He had discovered the signal pattern that would confuse their brains. He had found the mathematical key that could defeat them. They did not ban mathematics because humans were bad at it. They banned mathematics because humans were too good at it. Understood now, though were afraid. They had conquered 100 worlds with their superior technology, but they had never met a species like humanity. Humans saw patterns everywhere. Humans made connections that should not exist. Humans could look at a few numbers and understand an entire system. They could not do this. They thought in straight lines. They solved problems one step at a time. When they encountered human mathematicians, they realized the danger immediately. Given enough time, humans would calculate how to destroy them. So they burned the books, they killed the scientists, they made numbers illegal. But they could not kill every human who remembered. Carefully put the papers back in the box. His hands were still shaking, but now it was not fear. It was excitement. He had the weapon that could free humanity. He just needed to find people brave enough to use it. That night walked through the colony with his head down, looking like any other worker going home. But his eyes were searching for the resistance. He knew they existed. Everyone knew. Sometimes soldiers disappeared. Sometimes equipment was sabotaged. Sometimes messages appeared on walls before being quickly cleaned away. The resistance was out there and was going to find them. He did not have to search long. The resistance found him first. A hand grabbed his arm and pulled him into a dark alley. Before he could scream, another hand covered his mouth. A woman's voice spoke in his ear. "You're the one who was looking at the forbidden papers. We have eyes everywhere. You can either come with us and explain yourself, or we can turn you over to the... Choose now." Nodded slowly, the hand released his mouth. "I'll come with you," he said. "I have something to show you, something that changes everything." The woman studied his face in the dim light. Her eyes were hard and suspicious, but there was something else there too. Hope. "My name is," she said, "and this better be worth the risk." Smiled for the first time in years. "It is," he said. "I know why they banned mathematics, and I know how to use it against them." Led through the dark streets of the colony. They moved like shadows, hiding whenever patrols walked past. After an hour of walking, they reached an old water treatment plant that nobody used anymore. Inside, a man was waiting. He was older than, with gray hair and tired eyes. He carried a weapon made from mining tools. "This is," said. "He was a guard at the processing center. Now he works with us." Looked at with suspicion. "You're the one who saved Overseer. Some people think you're a traitor. Some people think you're a spy." "I'm neither," said. "I saved him because I acted without thinking. But what I found in those files is worth more than one life." He told them everything. About Professor's research. About the mathematical weaknesses of about the frequencies and patterns that could destroy them. Listened without speaking. When finished, her eyes were wet with tears. "Professor was my father," she said quietly. Felt the air leave his lungs. He remembered the old man's gentle smile. He remembered the way he explained difficult concepts with simple words. He remembered watching him die. "I'm sorry," said. "He was a great teacher." Wiped her eyes and stood up straight. "He was a great man, and now we can finish his work." She looked at. "Bring him to the others tonight." The others lived deep beneath the colony in tunnels that they had forgotten. There were 12 of them hiding in the darkness like ghosts. They had beds made of old blankets. They had food stolen from kitchens. They had hope, even when hope seemed foolish. Introduced them one by one. Was 26 years old with bright eyes and a quick smile. Before they came, she had been studying at a university. When the soldiers burned the libraries, she memorized as many books as she could. Calculus, algebra, geometry. They all lived inside her head now. "I can recite the first 500 pages of advanced mathematics," she said proudly. "Word for word, including the footnotes." Was 34, an engineer who used to design spacecraft. Now he built weapons from garbage. His corner of the hideout was filled with strange machines made from broken parts. "I can make a radio from a cooking pot and some wire," he said. "Give me Professor's equations and I can make something that hurts the—" Grandmother was the oldest. She was 72 years old, with white hair and wrinkled hands that still moved with precision. Before the invasion, she had been a professor of statistics. Now she taught the young ones in whispered lessons. "Numbers are not just tools," she told. "They are truth. They can ban books, they can kill teachers, but they cannot kill truth." Shared Professor's research with them. They gathered around him like students in a secret classroom, wrote the equations in the dirt, started sketching machine designs. Grandmother checked the mathematics, nodding slowly as she worked through each proof. Days passed, then weeks. The group worked in shifts, sleeping only when their bodies refused to continue. They were rebuilding something that they had tried to destroy. Human knowledge was the first to build a working device. It was ugly and loud and made from parts of a broken mining drill. But when he activated it near a captured soldier, the alien's shell cracked and it fell to the ground, screaming in a language nobody understood. "It works," whispered. "It actually works." But they needed more. One device was not enough to defeat an empire. They needed to understand the completely. They needed data about their bodies, their ships, their command structure. Volunteered for the mission. Using his position in the file office, he gained access to restricted areas. He stole medical records. He shipped designs. He took everything he could find and smuggled it back to the resistance. The information was incredible. They were even more predictable than Professor had realized. Their fleet always flew in the same geometric patterns. Their commanders always responded to threats in the same way. Their entire civilization was built on rules that never changed. "They can't think differently," Grandmother explained. "Their brains don't work that way. They see one solution to a problem and they use it forever. Creativity is impossible for them." "That's why they're afraid of us," added. "We can do something they can't. We can imagine new things. We can adapt. We can surprise them." Looked up from her calculations. "I've figured out the neural pattern that controls their decision-making. If we broadcast the right signal, we could confuse their entire chain of command." Grinned. "I can build that. Give me 3 days." Everything was going well, too well. Should have known that it couldn't last. The came at night. Grandmother was above ground, meeting with a contact who promised supplies, but it was a trap. The contact was dead. They were waiting. They captured her and brought her to the interrogation center. Everyone in the resistance knew what happened there. Nobody survived. Wanted to attempt a rescue. Said it was suicide. Said they needed more time to build weapons. The arguments went on for hours while Grandmother waited for death. But had a plan of her own. She knew she would not survive. She knew they would try to make her talk, so she did something they would never expect. She talked. She told them everything. The location of the hideout, the names of the resistance members, the details of their plan. All of it was lies. She sent them to an abandoned mine on the other side of the moon. She gave them names of people who had been dead for years. She described a plan that had never existed. And while they wasted time chasing ghosts, smuggled out one final message. A guard named, secretly loyal to the resistance, carried a small piece of paper hidden in her clothing. On that paper, Grandmother had written her final gift to humanity. A mathematical proof. It was beautiful and simple and terrible. It showed exactly how to calculate the resonance frequency of any based on the color of their shell. It explained how to predict their behavior based on the time of day. It revealed patterns that even Professor had not discovered. Had spent her entire captivity doing mathematics in her head. She had completed the work of a lifetime in a single night. When they realized she had tricked them, they killed her. But it was too late. The proof was already in his hands, and when she read it, she understood that her father's work was finally complete. "She gave us everything," whispered, "everything we need to win." Took the proof and began building, memorized every number, prepared the resistance for what was coming, and looked at the small piece of paper covered in his handwriting. Such a small thing, just numbers on paper, but those numbers would change the universe. They had tried to ban mathematics, they had failed, and now mathematics would destroy them. Overseer stood on the bridge of his warship and watched the human colony below. The lights of their buildings looked like dying stars against the dark ice of Europa. Such a small species, such a weak species, and yet they troubled him in ways he could not explain. Had served the hegemony for 40 years. He had conquered 7 worlds. He had crushed rebellions without mercy. But humans were different from any species he had faced before. They did not think correctly. Other species followed patterns. When threatened, they ran. When cornered, they surrendered. Their behavior could be calculated and predicted, but humans were chaos wrapped in flesh. They made decisions that made no logical sense. They sacrificed themselves for strangers. They fought battles they could not win. They kept secrets even when keeping secrets meant death. The old female they had captured proved this. She had lied to them with a smile on her face. She had wasted 3 days of their time with false information, and when they finally killed her, she had laughed. Laughed. Did not understand laughter. They had no equivalent. When something was funny, they simply noted it and moved on. But humans laughed at pain, at death, at the universe itself. It was disturbing. His second-in-command approached. "Overseer, we have analyzed the resistance activity. They are building something. Our sensors detected unusual energy readings in the lower tunnels." "Send soldiers," ordered. "Find them, kill them all." "Yes, Overseer." But knew it would not be that simple. It never was with humans. Deep beneath the colony stared at grandmother's proof. The mathematics was elegant, beautiful, perfect. It explained everything about the in a single page of numbers. Their shells vibrated at frequencies determined by their color. Blue shells resonated at 847 Hz, green shells at 923 Hz, brown shells at 756 Hz. A sound at the right frequency would shatter any light glass. Their brains sent signals based on prime number sequences. The pattern repeated every 23 pulses. During the gap between sequences, they could not react quickly. They became slow and confused for exactly 0.3 seconds. Their decision-making followed strict rules. When faced with a threat, they always protected their commanders first. When pursuing an enemy, they always used the same geometric formations. When given conflicting orders, they always froze and waited for clarification. Every part of them could be calculated. Every weakness could be exploited. "This is incredible," whispered. "Figured out things that would have taken years to discover." "She was the best of us," said. His voice was thick with grief. "And now we have to make sure her death meant something." He had built a new resonance device based on proof. This one was smaller and more powerful than the first. It could produce multiple frequencies at once, affecting of different shell colors simultaneously. "We need to test it," said. "We need to know it works before we plan anything bigger." Stepped forward. "I'll do it. I can get close to the patrols near the processing center. If I activate the device, we'll see what happens." "It's too dangerous," said. "If it doesn't work, you'll be captured." "If it doesn't work, we're all dead anyway." Took the device from. It was the size of a small box with buttons and dials that had salvaged from broken equipment. "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." He went alone, carrying the device under his coat. The processing center was busy during the day with soldiers everywhere, walked like he belonged there. He had learned that confidence was the best disguise. A patrol of 4 soldiers marched toward him, blue shells. He checked calculations in his head. 847 Hz. He adjusted the dial on the device. His finger found the button. He pressed it. The sound was high and strange, like metal singing. The soldiers stopped walking. Their bodies began to shake. Then their shells cracked and they fell to the ground, screaming in pain. Humans around the processing center stared in shock. Some ran. Others stood frozen, turned off the device and walked away calmly, his heart pounding in his chest. It worked. Proof was correct. The weapon was real. But his victory did not last long. Within hours, they realized what had happened. They analyzed the bodies of the dead soldiers and understood the cause. Someone had used mathematics against them. The punishment was swift and terrible. Soldiers swept through the colony, arresting anyone suspected of forbidden knowledge. Teachers, engineers, anyone who had ever shown skill with numbers. They executed them publicly, one after another, until the streets ran with blood. Then they destroyed entire settlements. 3 mining camps on the far side of Europa were burned to ash. 10,000 humans died in a single night. The message was clear. Mathematics meant death. But it was too late to stop what had started. Had already memorized proof. Before the crackdown, she taught it to 15 other people. Those 15 taught it to others. The knowledge spread like fire through dry grass. They could not kill everyone who knew. But they tried. Died protecting a group of children who had been learning basic equations. He stood in front of the soldiers and refused to move. They shot him 17 times before he fell. Was captured trying to escape the colony. They took her to the interrogation center. She never came out. Lost his hand when a patrol found his workshop. He barely escaped with his life, crawling through maintenance tunnels for 3 days before reaching the deep hideout. The resistance was broken, only and remained 3 people against an empire. They hid in the deepest tunnels where even the sensors could not reach. They had no food, no weapons, no hope, just proof and the memories of everyone they had lost. Stared at the stone walls around them. We can't fight them directly, not anymore, we don't have enough people. Then we find another way, said. We don't need soldiers, we need teachers. Looked up, his bandaged arm cradled against his chest. What do you mean? Taught others. The knowledge is already spreading. We just need to spread it faster, further, until every human knows how to hurt them. Understood. Her eyes lit up with something that might have been hope. We can't build an army, but we can build a school. Not a school, said. 1,000,000 schools. Every human becomes a weapon. Every human learns the mathematics. They can't kill us all. Smiled despite his pain. The old communication system, the one the miners used before the invasion, it still works in some places. I can boost the signal. We won't send weapons, said. We'll send knowledge, the frequencies, the patterns, the proofs. Let every human learn how to calculate their own freedom. It was a desperate plan, a foolish plan, the kind of plan that only humans would create. But it was the only plan they had. And in the darkness of those forgotten tunnels, 3 survivors began to build something more powerful than any weapon. A revolution of numbers. The first transmission went out on a cold morning, 37 days after the crackdown. Had rebuilt the old mining communication system using parts from broken machines and power from a hidden generator. The signal was weak, but it could reach anywhere in the solar system. Spoke into the microphone. His voice was calm and steady. This is a message for all humans. Listen carefully. What I am about to tell you is illegal. It will get you killed if they discover you know it, but it will also set you free. He read proof slowly, number by number, the frequencies for each shell color, the timing of their neural sequences, the patterns of their behavior, everything a human needed to understand their enemy. You don't need weapons, he said. You need knowledge. Learn these numbers, teach them to others. When the time comes, you will know what to do. The message lasted 12 minutes. then cut the transmission before they could trace it. For 3 days, nothing happened, worried that nobody had heard. He worried that the signal had been too weak. He worried that humans had become too afraid to listen. Then the reports started coming in. On Mars, a young woman named worked in the agricultural domes. She grew food for the colonies, working 18 hours a day under the hot lights. She had heard the transmission on an old radio that she kept hidden in her quarters. She did not fully understand the mathematics, but she understood that it mattered, so she turned the numbers into a song. The song spread through the workers like a secret prayer. They sang it while they planted seeds. They hummed it while they harvested crops. They heard the melody but did not recognize the danger hidden inside it. On Luna, an engineer named listened to the transmission while working in a weapons factory. He built missiles for the fleet, hating every moment of it. When he heard proof, he immediately began designing a resonance device. He could not build it openly, so he built it in pieces, hidden inside industrial equipment, a tuning fork disguised as a tool, a frequency generator hidden in a power supply, a speaker embedded in a cleaning machine. When the pieces were assembled, he would have a weapon. On a transport ship traveling between Jupiter and Saturn, an older woman named listened with tears in her eyes. She was the same who had carried's final message out of the interrogation center. She had thought she was alone. Now she knew she was part of something bigger. Was a navigator. She knew the patrol patterns of the fleet better than anyone. Using proof, she calculated the exact moments when the fleet would be most vulnerable. She shared this information with smugglers, rebels, anyone who would listen. The numbers spread. In the factories and farms and mines of the Empire, humans began to remember what they had forgotten. They remembered that knowledge was power. They remembered that mathematics was not just numbers on paper. It was the language of the universe. And they were learning to speak it. Overseer watched the reports with growing horror. Illegal transmissions from Europa, strange songs on Mars, unusual activity on Luna, encoded messages passing between ships. Something was happening, something he could not calculate. He presented his concerns to the Hegemony Council, the ruling body of the Empire. 12 ancient commanders who had conquered more worlds than could count. The humans are organizing, said. They are sharing forbidden knowledge. Our crackdowns are not working. Every time we execute one mathematician, 2 more appear. The council leader studied him with cold eyes. What do you suggest? We must eliminate the species entirely. As long as humans exist, they will threaten us. Their minds work differently from ours. They can do things we cannot understand. They are too dangerous to enslave. The council was silent. In 10,000 years, they had never ordered the complete destruction of a species. They had always found value in slaves. But was right, humans were different. How long would it take? The council leader asked. 6 months to position our fleets, then perhaps 1 year to complete the extermination. We would need to destroy every colony, every ship, every hiding place. Nothing can be left alive. The council discussed the matter for 1 hour, then they voted. The decision was unanimous. Humanity would be erased from the universe. Deep beneath Europa, received the news from a spy inside the command. A young human who cleaned the overseer's quarters had overheard the transmission from the Hegemony Council. 6 months, he told, and we have 6 months before they try to kill everyone. His face was pale, but her voice was steady. Then we move faster, send more transmissions, spread the knowledge further. If they're going to destroy us, we make sure we hurt them first. Shook his head. That's not enough. Hurting them isn't winning. We need to beat them completely or we all die. Had been quiet, thinking. Now he looked up with something strange in his eyes. We can beat them, he said slowly, but not by fighting them, by making them beat themselves. What do you mean? Asked. Proof tells us that they are perfectly predictable. They always respond the same way to the same situation. They can't help it. Their brains don't allow them to think differently. Understood. So if we create the right situation, they will respond exactly as we calculate. We won't have to attack their fleets. We can make their fleets go exactly where we want them. Smiled for the first time in weeks. We won't fight a war, we'll solve an equation. The three of them worked through the night. They used proof to calculate how they would respond to specific threats. They modeled the movement of every ship in the fleet. They predicted the decisions of every commander. Then they designed a trap. For the next 4 months, the Resistance sent carefully calculated messages. They allowed certain information to reach They staged fake attacks in specific locations. They created patterns that looked like random chaos but were actually precise mathematics. They responded exactly as predicted. They moved their ships to counter threats that did not exist. They sent soldiers to protect targets that were never in danger. They organized their entire fleet according to a plan that humans had written for them. They did not know they were being manipulated. They could not know. Their brains did not work that way. Songs reached millions of humans. Hidden devices were and spread to every factory. Calculations helped smugglers avoid every patrol. Humanity was preparing for something. They could feel it, but they could not understand it. Because understanding would have required imagination, and they had never learned to imagine. Looked at the final calculations. Every ship in the solar system would be in a specific position on a specific day. Every soldier would be exactly where the mathematics said they would be. The trap was set. Now they just needed to close it. The day of the final calculation came on a morning like any other. The sun rose over Europa, distant and cold. The fleet floated in perfect formation around the human colonies, ready to begin the extermination. Every ship was in position. Every soldier was at their station. Exactly where had calculated they would be. Overseer stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the countdown to destruction. In 1 hour, his fleet would begin the systematic elimination of humanity. Every colony would be burned. Every ship would be destroyed. Every human would die. He should have felt satisfaction. Instead, he felt something else, something that had no name in his language. Unease. The humans had been too quiet lately. The transmissions had stopped. The resistance activity had decreased. It was as if they had given up. But new humans, they did not give up. They were not capable of surrender. Something was wrong. Deep beneath the ice of Europa, checked the time on his stolen chronometer. The numbers glowed in the darkness. In exactly 43 minutes, every resonance device hidden across the solar system would activate simultaneously. Agricultural workers on Mars had devices hidden in their equipment. Factories on Luna were filled with weapons disguised as machines. Smugglers had carried devices to every corner of human space. Millions of humans had learned the frequencies. Millions of humans knew the timing. Millions of humans were waiting for the signal. They would not fire weapons. They would not throw bombs. They would simply make sounds. The right sounds, at the right frequencies, at the right moment. Mathematics would do the rest. Sat beside in the darkness. Her father's research had started this. Grandmother's proof had completed it. Now all they could do was wait. "Do you think it will work?" she asked. Thought about everything they had lost. Professor, grandmother, thousands of humans who had died keeping the knowledge alive. "It has to work," he said. "There is no other option." Limped toward them, his injured arm still wrapped in bandages. He carried a small device in his good hand. "The signal is ready," he said. "When I press this button, it will broadcast to every hidden device in the system. They will all activate at once." Took the device. "Then let me do it. This is my father's revenge and everyone else they killed." Nodded and stepped back. The chronometer counted down, 30 minutes, 20, 10. In the fleet, soldiers prepared their weapons. Commanders reviewed their orders. Ships moved into firing positions around the helpless human colonies. 5 minutes. Watched the countdown with those unblinking eyes. Something was wrong. He was sure of it now, but he could not calculate what it was. His second-in-command approached. "Overseer, we are detecting unusual activity on the surface. Humans are gathering in large groups." "They are praying," said. "Their species does this before death. It is meaningless." "Yes, Overseer." 1 minute. Closed his eyes. He thought about the numbers. The beautiful, perfect numbers that would save humanity had found them. Professor had discovered them. Countless humans had died to protect them. Now those numbers would finally be used. 30 seconds. His finger rested on the button. Her hand was steady. Her breathing was calm. 10 seconds. Across the solar system, millions of humans stood together. They did not know the whole plan. They only knew that at this moment they would strike back. They would use the knowledge that had been passed from teacher to student, from parent to child, from friend to friend. They would use mathematics. 0. Press the button. The signal went out at the speed of light. It reached every hidden device in the system within seconds, and then the sounds began. On Mars, the agricultural workers activated their equipment. A high singing note filled the domes, strange and beautiful and deadly. Soldiers near the farms felt their shells begin to vibrate. They tried to move, tried to call for help, but their bodies would not obey. On Luna, the factories came alive with hidden frequencies. Thousands of machines produced sounds that human ears could barely hear, but ears heard them perfectly, and bodies could not resist them. On every ship, in every colony, in every corner of human space, the frequencies rang out. Some came from devices. Some came from human voices singing the songs that had created. Some came from objects being struck at the right rhythm, the right tone, the right moment. The mathematics was simple. Any human could do it. That had always been the point. In the fleet, chaos erupted. Soldiers collapsed as their shells cracked from the resonance. Commanders could not issue orders because their neural patterns were disrupted. Ships drifted without guidance as their crews fell into confusion. Felt his own body shaking. The frequency was wrong for his shell color, so it did not kill him, but it still hurt. It still disrupted his thoughts. He tried to give orders. His voice would not work properly. He tried to calculate a response. His brain could not focus. All around him, his soldiers were dying or disabled. His fleet was falling apart. His carefully planned extermination had become a disaster. And the humans were not stopping. They kept producing the frequencies. They kept disrupting the. Minute after minute, hour after hour, they sustained the attack with nothing but sound and mathematics. On the surface of Europa, humans who had cowered for 60 years finally raised their heads. They looked at the soldiers who had terrorized them, now lying helpless on the ground. They looked at each other with something they had almost forgotten. Pride. By the time the frequencies stopped, the fleet was broken. 70% of their soldiers were dead or disabled. Their ships floated without direction. Their commanders could not coordinate any response. Humanity had won. 3 days later, found himself standing in a ruined building on Europa, surrounded by human soldiers. He was one of the few officers who had survived. Stood before him looking nothing like a miner anymore. He looked like what he had always been underneath. A scientist, a mathematician, a human. Hal asked. His voice was weak, his shell was cracked. "How did you calculate everything so precisely? Our movements, our positions, our weaknesses, it should have been impossible." Considered the question. "We didn't calculate precisely," he said. "We made guesses. We filled in gaps with assumptions. We got things wrong and adjusted our plans. Half of our predictions were probably incorrect." stared at him. Then how did you win? Because we didn't need to be perfect. We just needed to be good enough. That's what you never understood about mathematics. It's not about certainty. It's about finding truth through uncertainty. It's about adapting when reality doesn't match your calculations. Had no response. The concept was beyond his comprehension. His species had never learned to adapt. They had never needed to. Until now. 1 year later stood before the first public university built since the invasion. Thousands of humans had gathered for the opening ceremony, young and old, strong and weak, all of them hungry for knowledge. The building was simple, stone walls, wooden doors, nothing impressive to look at, but above the entrance words had been carved into the rock. They banned our numbers, they could not ban our minds. Remembered her father. She remembered grandmother. She remembered and everyone who had died so that this moment could happen. Then she turned to the crowd and smiled. Mathematics is the language of the universe, she said. For 60 years we were forbidden to speak it, but we never forgot. We never stopped learning. We never stopped teaching. She paused, looking at the young faces before her. Now we will teach openly. We will share knowledge freely. And we will never, ever let anyone take our numbers away again. The crowd cheered, children laughed, old people wept. And somewhere in the back stood alone, watching. He thought about the journey that had brought them here. The fear, the sacrifice, the beautiful, terrible power of numbers. They had been right to fear human mathematics. They had just been wrong to think they could stop it. Some things cannot be banned. Some truths cannot be hidden. Some species are simply too stubborn, too creative, too human to be kept in the dark. The universe had tried to silence humanity. Humanity had responded with equations. And equations, as grandmother had always said, are truth. And truth always wins.